Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We have to do this right for the forest, but we have to do this for the Indigenous nations to make sure that they're partners in this.
Parts of BC's forests off limits. The province unveils a plan around old-growth logging. Also,
it worries me as a parent.
BC's biggest school district says no to a vaccine mandate for staff. What's behind that decision? And 2 crashes in less than a day leave 2 people dead in Richmond.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Anita is away this week. The province calls it a major step to protect old-growth forests. Forest companies call it a devastating attack on their industry. The BC government has now put a hold on the harvesting of 2.6 million hectares of what it's called at-risk forest. Our Belle Puri joins us now with more. Belle, what does this plan involve?
Well, the parcels of forest are spread across the province, but if you set them side by side, they would equal more than 6,000 Stanley Parks. The 2.6 million hectares of forest is described as rare, ancient, or sustaining big trees. It's about half of the province's identified old growth that hasn't been protected yet. Now, the deferrals or the suspension of logging are the result of recommendations made by an independent panel of experts. Their focus is on areas considered to be high-risk zones where biodiversity loss would be irreversible. The plan will have an impact on workers and the communities they live in.
We're looking at opportunities for further education or increased skills. We're looking at supports to actual communities. We're looking at new ways of economic diversification in the communities. So there's a whole suite of programs.
The deferrals are for 2 years. Now, during that time, the province will work with First Nations on long-term strategies. That could include permanent preservation or eventually harvesting of the trees.
The irony of it is that every time we make progress, we make a step to become a more prosperous community, people are kicking down the door to stop us. And that's what becomes the frustrating part. First of all, we try to comply with what the standards are. And then bang, we just can't seem to make any economic gain without somebody opposed to what we're doing or opposed to some natural resource activity.
The province has given First Nations 30 days to say whether they support the deferrals. Where they say yes, then discussions will take place with logging companies that thought they were going to cut down trees in those areas. The goal is to come up with an integrated landscape management plan.
Big plan. What do forestry companies and environmental groups think of all this, Belle?
Well, first, the industry, they say it's a devastating blow. There's talk of job loss in the range of 4,000 to 5,000 jobs, as well as mill closures, between 14 and 20 sawmills in BC and 2 pulp mills. Large, medium, and small family-owned companies are fearing the worst. Now, the 2-year deferrals can be implemented voluntarily by companies, but if they don't volunteer, then by ministerial orders that revoke permits and provide no compensation in the short run.
Well, what about me? I'm 32. My brother's 29. We have a whole lifetime of career left. And are you going to help us?
BC Timber Sales is the agency that manages the annual allowable cut in the province. It stopped advertising and selling timber rights in the affected areas the minute the announcement was made. And on the environmental side of the equation, the announcement is being seen as a move in the right direction.
And we need to make big steps, and this is the first of one of those steps. And if we actually implement the old growth strategic review as it's written, then more will be done. So I guess at the end of the day, the proof will be in the pudding in terms of how far we get. I do think this is a good first step. It was too slow, but now we just need to move forward.
And the provincial opposition was quick to react. In fact, even before the announcement was made, the BC Liberals say the government is going ahead without an economic impact study and just hasn't considered the consequences.
Lots to think about. Belle Puri, thanks very much. That announcement from the province comes on the heels of an historic pledge signed by more than 100 world leaders at COP26, vowing to end deforestation by the end of this decade.
I'm confident we can do this. All we need to do is summon the will to do what we know is right and we know is necessary and know is in our capacity.
$19 billion US will go towards protecting and restoring forests. 5 countries, not including Canada, pledged $1.7 billion to finance Indigenous forest conservation. Last week, a report by 4 major environmental groups found Canada fails to account for the magnitude of carbon emissions from its forestry sector.
We've been at the same cutting level for the last.
Later in the show, we're going to speak with a UBC forestry expert about BC's decisions around old growth and what the COP pledge could mean. Richmond RCMP are asking for witnesses and anyone with dashcam footage to help them piece together 2 deadly crashes in less than a day. Mounties say one driver was killed after a car collided with a truck near number 4 road in Westminster Highway around 9 this morning. 3 other people were taken to hospital with life-threatening injuries. Both vehicles, as you can see, were left crumpled on some nearby grass. One person was ejected. The crash also sent fish spilling out onto the road. It's not clear what led to the collision, but police are not ruling out speed or driver inattention. Number 4 road in Westminster has been closed for most of the day. And yesterday, police say the driver of a grey SUV was killed after it collided with a school bus on Alderbridge Way and number 3 road just before 4 in the afternoon. The driver of the bus was left unhurt, apparently, and there were no students on board. Right now, police are not releasing the names of the victims in either crash. Mounties are urging drivers to slow down, especially as the fall days become darker. BC's largest school district will not mandate vaccines for its staff. The Surrey School Board made that announcement today, and as Joel Ballard reports, many people, including parents and educators, are disappointed with that decision.
Inside Surrey's schools, vaccines will not be mandatory.
I was sad and angry.
Lindsay Locke's daughter goes to school in Surrey, but the 11-year-old is too young to get a vaccine.
It worries me as a parent because I have to put my trust in the school board, the school district to make sure that they're keeping my daughter and other children safe, and I don't feel like they're doing that.
That frustration not only felt by Locke, but many parents.
Those are the most vulnerable population right now as it is, and if we can add an extra layer of protection to these measures, then I think that's what parents were hoping for.
For its part, the board says it's simply following the data shared by public health officials.
The truth of the matter is that Fraser Health advised us at this time that there was no need for a vaccine mandate.
He says the board was told that given the high vaccination rate in Surrey, a mandate would have little impact in curbing transmissions, which is occurring between students, not staff. It's hard not to look at what has happened in the healthcare system, where thousands of unvaccinated employees have been placed on unpaid leave, and wonder whether that was a factor in the school board's decision. Alan agrees it was a consideration.
That would amount to 600 people. And so you can only imagine how that would be negative on the classroom. In some cases, classes wouldn't function.
The Surrey Teachers Association says this all could have been avoided if the province hadn't passed the responsibility of vaccine mandates onto different districts.
When you leave it to the local decision making, then it's also subject to political pressures, and the result could be that the school districts that need it the most, because there isn't much vaccination in the community, are least likely to actually do it.
Alan says the board follows the science, and if Fraser Health changes its advice, it will revisit the issue. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Surrey.
Turning to the province-wide COVID picture, some encouraging numbers today as case counts continue to go down. The province announced 406 new cases today, well under the 7-day rolling average of 532. Still, 5 more people have died, all but 1 in Northern Health. Active cases held more or less stable, under 4,700, though the number has been decreasing steadily since early October. Ski slopes in BC are scheduled to open in just a few weeks. At Whistler Blackcomb, skiers do not need proof of vaccination to purchase a lift pass. That has some locals concerned about mixing with unvaccinated visitors.
Grouse Mountain and a few other BC ski resorts are now requiring proof of vaccination in order to buy a ski pass. BC Health should pass and extend the order to require proof of vaccination in order to buy a ski lift ticket. There is virtually no cost.
But Health Minister Adrian Dix says he doesn't think public health officials will introduce such a plan or order because Whistler has strict COVID protocols. He cites the fact that bars and restaurants still require proof of vaccination, and there's a mask mandate for all indoor activities, including riding on gondolas. Dix says the Whistler community has one of the highest vaccine rates in the province, and the measures add a layer of protection for anyone who wants to hit the slopes. Home sales may be down across Metro Vancouver, but the benchmark price is not. It jumped almost 15% in October compared to last year. The dynamic between supply and demand is edging up values, with the benchmark price for all residential homes reaching almost $1.2 million. The Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver says the total number of homes listed on the Lower Mainland last month was just over 8,000. That's down 35% from last October. The board says sales are still above historical averages, with last month's sales up 22% above the 10-year October average. If you're struggling to make ends meet, you are not alone. Costs for families continue to soar in Metro Vancouver and Victoria. That's in a new report. As Benit Brach reports, one solution being floated, rather than a minimum wage, is a living wage.
For this employee, living on BC's minimum wage was not easy.
It was tough, going paycheck to paycheck. Can I pay this bill? Can I get this done? Do I have money for rent? Can I get milk for cereal for the kids?
Look at this beautiful homepage.
Now he is one of nearly 30,000 employees in BC being paid a livable wage. He works at a power washing company, a relief in taking care of his 2 kids.
I'm able to start putting money away for their education in the future, something that never even crossed my mind prior to living wage.
A new report finds people working in Metro Vancouver would need to earn at least $20.52 an hour to meet the basic costs of raising 2 children. Victoria has the second highest living wage, just 10 cents lower, followed by Nelson and Revelstoke. But these living wages are far higher than BC's minimum wage at $15.20. The gap, a challenge for many to meet basic lifestyle needs.
The main thing that's driving the living wage to go up is the cost of housing. It is on the increase, and we'd like the government to do more to make life more affordable.
While housing still needs work, more government investments in childcare are helping lower living costs in BC.
The living wage would actually be $2 an hour higher if it wasn't for government investments in childcare.
The report also finds more employers are paying living wages to employees. This year, 100 new organizations signed up to pay living wages. That's more than ever before.
I wanted more from my employees. I wanted more of their passions at work.
He knows it can be challenging for businesses to pay employees above the going rate, but says if you don't pay your staff appropriately, you might have trouble with attracting and retaining employees.
If you feel that you can't afford that right now, well, maybe you can bump your employees up to $18 an hour from $16 an hour, and then give them more responsibility and things that they love to do.
For Strandberg, it's all about loving his job, from being a technician to now a manager. And he hopes to see more people get a shot at improving their lifestyle. Benit Brach, CBC News, Vancouver.
Here's a list no city wants to be on top of. For the 5th straight year, Vancouver has been named the rattiest city in Canada. Delightful. Orkin Canada based the list on the number of rat-related treatments their teams carried out from last August to this July. The company says the pandemic forced people to work and eat at home, so the rats headed to the burbs and residential areas. Burnaby, Richmond, and Surrey also made it to the top 10 list for rattiest cities in our province. Orkin says it's seen rodents acting bolder, with daytime rodent sightings rising in the normally nocturnal animals. Time for the weather. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast. Joe, damp day here on the south coast. We've got a warning now, but a downright dangerous day in parts of northern BC.
You said it, Dan. Waking up to freezing fog in Prince George. I want to show you pictures before we get to the rain here out of Prince George this morning, where just an hour of the freezing rain coated the sidewalks, roads, and highways with ice, leading to a number of accidents. And UNBC actually closed for the morning hour I just couldn't get up the hill to get to class. And you can see it looks like a skating rink with just an hour of that ice accumulating. Changing over to rain later in the day, but with temperatures this time of the year sort of hovering around the freezing mark, all you need is a warm layer in the upper atmosphere before freezing on contact. So we'll be keeping an eye on that across the province in the days ahead. It is warm, wet, and windy across the south coast. This is the radar right now, and you can see it's coming down out there. Environment Canada issuing the rainfall warning just a few hours ago for Metro Vancouver. Sea to sky. It's a wind warning for the north and west coast of the island, where wind gusts tonight could peak close to 100 kilometers per hour. For Metro Vancouver, though, we're talking 50 millimeters of rain just through the overnight period. That's been our pattern so far this week. These low pressure systems sneak in overnight. We get a bit of a breath as we take a break between systems, and then, Dan, the next one set to hit in the evening. And that is our story again tomorrow. It's wet tonight, but let me see if I can find you the break coming up in a bit.
Please do. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Students at Simon Fraser University have been pushing for the university to fully divest from fossil fuels. They'd planned a hunger strike this week, but yesterday the university announced full divestment by 2025.
It's a step in the right direction, and the university has decided that it's not going to be complicit in the murder of its students, which is what the climate emergency is. So that's really what was our framing from the very beginning, was that the university is invested in the murder of its students by being invested in the fossil fuel industry.
Student activists say they wanted the university to do more to address the climate emergency, and they were prepared to take extreme measures, including risking arrest. The university says it has a carbon reduction strategy, has had one for many years, and only 5% of indirect investments are still related to fossil fuel industries. SFU says the decision to divest is in line with its commitment to net zero emissions. Justin Trudeau is pushing forward the idea of a global price on emissions. Canada co-hosted a panel today at the UN Climate Summit in Glasgow. As David Cochrane explains, it's a signal to the world that pollution should not be free.
It's a collection of heavy hitters pulled together by Canada to pitch a big idea.
The clearer call to create a global standard around putting a price on pollution.
Just 20% of global emissions are subject to carbon pricing. Trudeau wants that tripled to 60% by 2030. The goal is to stop polluters from running to no-price jurisdictions to avoid paying for their pollution, and to cut emissions enough to make the 1.5-degree global warming target viable.
Unless you have a real global standard, we're never going to get there, not at the pace and scale and speed that we need to in order to keep 1.5 alive.
Canada is committed to leading on this.
They hope the summit launches serious talks on the strategy by showcasing examples where carbon pricing has worked, such as Europe.
It helped us decouple growth from greenhouse gas emissions. So you can prosper while cutting emissions.
A global carbon price will be more transparent. It will be fairer, it will be easier to see and administer.
An easy sell to a panel of European allies and multilateral organizations, but missing are big economies with big emissions.
You know how hard it was for Canada to develop a carbon pricing mechanism at the domestic level. Those debates should happen also in the United States.
Look, a few years ago, nobody would have even imagined that we could set a global minimum corporate tax. And suddenly we have. These are things that are the right ideas that when their time has come, people start to adopt.
Trudeau may be optimistic about the plan for a global carbon tax, but also missing from this are China, India, and Russia. Big emitters and big holdouts, even no-shows for some of the climate initiatives at this summit. David Cochrane, CBC News, Glasgow.
The U.S. CDC has given the okay to vaccinate children ages 5 to 11. Reaction south of the border after this. Hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. Thanks for sticking around. Halloween has come and gone, but an 11-year-old boy in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia is already planning for next year. Inspired by his love of all things scary, the family hosted a haunted house called the House of Doom As Colleen Jones tells us, the event raised thousands of dollars for the IWK hospital.
Beware. Beware. 11-year-old Cannon Beasley's out checking the lineup to see what the crowd will look like for this House of Doom tour. He's checking the lights. I'm not sure if anyone loves Halloween as much as this kid. The obsession? Every year his parents allow him to get a few more animatronics. Those are the scary things that move. Why, he and his granddad even built this one, and there have been other additions.
It's the 12-foot skeleton, also new this year, and 2 5-foot skeletons that we've had for a while.
Everybody ready to get scared? They've gone bigger because Cannon and his family turned their House of Doom into a fundraiser for the IWK. Back in May, Cannon had surgery to remove a kidney that had a tumor, then another surgery to put this port in that delivers his chemotherapy. Somewhere in all of this, Cannon had the idea. The kid who needed medical help wanted to help the hospital helping him.
I've been spending a lot of time there recently getting my chemotherapy and my Wilms tumor taken out. And everybody at the IWK is so kind and is always trying to make me feel better every day.
So in the middle of a scary diagnosis, scaring others has made the family smile while others scream.
Cannon is going into his last chemotherapy treatment next week. So we are really looking forward to being able to put this behind us. And we are so grateful for the care that we've received.
What kid loves Halloween more than Christmas?
Cannon.
Okay, party of 3 coming in.
His dad, Dan, is on door duty.
Guys, enjoy. Single file, okay? He's my boy, and I love him, and he's absolutely amazing, and he's been an absolute rock star through everything from the diagnosis to having his kidney removed to the chemotherapy, and it's been an inspiration to, heroes come in all ages and sizes, and he is definitely a hero in my mind, and I tell him that every day.
And this hero has chosen to help the hospital helping him. They'd originally hoped to raise $2,500, but they've already raised $13,000, and they're still accepting donations. Colleen Jones, CBC News, Dartmouth.
The CDC in the United States has now approved the use of the Pfizer vaccine for children ages 5 to 11. Chris Reyes now on how they will vaccinate 28 million kids and the political reaction.
Stay loose. 1, 2, 3. You did great, sweetie.
These 2 sisters from North Carolina were some of the first children in the U.S. to get the vaccine as part of Pfizer's clinical trials. Now, more will follow. For many families, the shots can't come soon enough.
I'm hoping that all my classmates will get the vaccine so we can hang out.
I've lost a lot of family and a lot of close friends to COVID. I would hate to lose more.
The vaccine could be available as early as Wednesday. Pfizer started shipping doses over the weekend. Kids will get the same formula as adults, but a third of the dose given to the age group 12 and older.
Over the next couple of days, several million doses will start arriving at local pediatricians and family doctors' offices, pharmacies, children's hospitals, community health centers, rural health clinics, and other locations.
Vaccine mandates for adults have been extremely controversial in the U.S. Some parents fear schools will require kids to get the shots.
I refuse to put that in my children's body, so I will do whatever it takes to not have to do that.
My mom said that she doesn't want us getting it because we don't know the long-term side effects.
The CDC's advisory committee is an independent group of the country's leading scientists and doctors. Many spoke up after the vote to remind those listening that they're also parents.
We have reviewed this data, and I have vaccinated my kids because I feel like it's safe. And I would not recommend something if I did not feel that way.
In the U.S., about 6 million children between 0 and 18 have been diagnosed with COVID, that number peaking with the Delta variant. Some doctors say kids need the vaccine to help prevent another wave.
There's an urgent need for vaccination. The data that came out from Pfizer is impressive, that it protects against 90% of disease, and it looks overwhelmingly safe.
Chris Reyes reporting tonight from New York. The confirmed global death toll from COVID-19 has now climbed above 5 million people. That's in less than 2 years. The United States has lost more than any other country with 740,000 deaths. Here in Canada, 29,000 people have died. Despite those staggering numbers, one infectious diseases specialist says many people still don't take it seriously enough.
We still have people that minimize the virus. We still have people, despite overwhelming evidence, that brush this off and say things like, it's just the flu, which flu is also pretty bad, I might add, or it's just a cough or a cold. And it isn't. I mean, there's just overwhelming evidence to the contrary. You have 5 million confirmed deaths, probably closer to 17 million deaths. This is a horrible infection. It's obvious.
As Bogosh intimated, the real death toll from COVID-19 is likely much higher than the confirmed total of 5 million. That's due to limited testing and people dying at home without medical attention, especially in poor parts of the globe. COVID-19 is, though, the third leading cause of death globally after heart disease and stroke. A big step forward toward rebuilding BC's battered travel industry now. 3 more provincial airports have been added to the list of cities accepting overseas travelers. International flights will be landing at Kelowna, Abbotsford, and Victoria airports at the end of this month. Transport Canada says the government's strict vaccine travel requirements have made travel safe once again. 18 airports across Canada will be accepting international travelers. Passengers will still have to show proof they are fully vaccinated to board a plane and travel here. And while that announcement is welcome news for the travel industry, many Canadians planning to jump on a plane are doing a double take at the skyrocketing costs. Jamie Strachan talks to some would-be travelers wondering if it's even worth it.
And there's the children in Mexico, all in bed together.
After nearly 2 years spent close to home, Ian Wilson was eager to take his family on vacation, ready to create new memories.
Every year we before COVID, would go on a holiday with the family. It had been a few years, and the children are in their 20s now, so I was looking at taking the family to Vegas, right? Yeah. And Emma.
Then he started adding up the costs. The big ticket item, COVID testing. To fly from Canada to the U.S., a rapid antigen test, which runs about $40, is needed. To come home, Canadian travelers need to track down a more expensive PCR test.
It was going to be about $200 to $300 each, so about $1,000 or $1,500 for the whole family.
But it's not just the COVID tests. Everything is more expensive.
You have to look at car rental pricing first because that may be the most expensive part of your trip.
Canadians used to finding cheap car rentals are in for a shock. In many places, there's simply no inventory.
Areas like Florida, popular leisure travel destinations, we're seeing prices anywhere from $50 to $100 a day. But in previous years, it was easy to get rentals for $30, $35 a day. There was a lot of competition.
And the rock-bottom airfares common at the height of the pandemic have all but disappeared, returning back to 2019 prices before COVID hit.
A lot of travelers are eager to kind of get back out there and start exploring the world. And so really that pent-up demand has translated to a high demand.
For Ian Wilson, it's meant reevaluating this year's holiday plans.
That cost was just too much for our family to handle. So traveling in Canada seemed to be the more economical thing to do.
In the end, the Wilsons visited Nova Scotia. Maybe not the bright lights of the Las Vegas Strip, but still, it was nice to get away. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
2 major announcements on forestry today. First, a promise from the province to consult on old-growth logging deferrals, and a pledge at COP26 to end deforestation in 9 years. More from a BC expert on both after this.
course, here at the CBC, we're excited to be celebrating our 75th anniversary. All of us have our favorite moments, and we wanted to know yours too. So we sent Duncan McHugh out to find out what's your favorite CBC memory. But first, Duncan, what's yours?
Diana, my teen years were spent in James Bay, northern Quebec, where CBC North was the only game in town. I remember watching Midday with my parents, marveling at Pete from Pete's Fruitique and all those crazy exotic fruits. And I can't forget Friday nights, waiting for the music videos on Good Rockin' Tonight. For the past 75 years, CBC has generated a lot of memories for a lot of Canadians, from coast to coast to coast.
Our journey into the past embarks with a double-barreled CBC recollection of a big show and a big goal.
I'm probably one of the very, very few Canadians who did not see Paul Henderson's goal on TV in 1972 in the Summit Series, because I was in Gibson's shooting an episode of Beachcombers, playing the heavy in a teenage gang.
You got our brand now. We're all in this together.
We were on our lunch break and we had the radio on, so we heard Bob Cole with the call on Paul Henderson's winning goal there, and it was like just shouting and banging on the table.
Shot Henderson right in. He scored!
That was a big memory of CBC from those years.
A different CBC show may have planted a seed of protest in a young mind.
I was about 10 years old when I was watching the Royal Canadian Air Force. There were some biting comments that would be made against the dominant forces of the time.
Please don't hurt us, tree hugger. I'm going to save this forest from you and those other Macmillan Blodell weenies.
It struck a chord in me. It felt like something that was maybe more reflective of my values.
Some recall childhood wonderment at puppets named Rusty and Jerome.
My favorite CBC was the Friendly Giant that shows in the morning. And it had a little puppy. I think that I was so amazed that the little puppy was talking back to him.
Oh, beauteous! Blue skies, oh, snowy white clouds.
And it also sounds like the same person. And he was talking back to the little puppy like this. Good morning.
A gang of teenagers also broke new ground. The gang from Degrassi Junior High.
I loved watching Degrassi because, well, for one thing, it was Canadian, and I could feel that when watching it. And I could also just really relate to the kids on there. Felt like it was the kids down the block.
Hi, Snake. Hi, Melanie.
It just really captured what all youth, and especially Canadian youth, go through in our schools, and it was really good to watch.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight for you on CBC Vancouver News.
I just don't feel that they are putting our kids' safety first.
Fraser Health advised us at this time that there was no need for a vaccine mandate.
Plenty of parents and some educators are upset that BC's largest school district will not order staff to get vaccinated for COVID-19. The Surrey School District says it's following Fraser Health's recommendations, and both Surrey and White Rock have high vaccination rates already. Board members say they're also concerned if hundreds of teachers and staff refuse the shots and are off work. Richmond Mounties are looking for witnesses and anyone with dash cam footage after two separate crashes left two people dead in less than a day. This morning, Mounties say a truck and sedan collided near Westminster Highway and 4 Road. One person was killed. 3 others rushed to hospital with life-threatening injuries. Speed and inattention have not been ruled out as factors. And yesterday afternoon, the driver of an SUV was killed after running into a bus on Alderbridge Way. No children were on board.
We're giving the nations time to have those discussions, to have the discussions amongst themselves, also to have the discussions with our ministry on how they want to move forward, whether they want to move forward with the deferrals, whether they're going to need more time.
And the BC government is putting a hold on harvesting almost 3 million hectares of what it's called at-risk forest. It says it will consult with dozens of First Nations about pausing any logging operations that threaten old-growth forests. Forestry companies call it a huge blow to their industry. The government admits up to 4,500 jobs could be at risk and plans to come up with support programs for workers and communities. Climate watchers are keeping a close eye on COP26 amid cautious optimism at the climate conference. There are divisions, disappointments, and distractions. But Chris Brown reminds us leaders made some actual progress.
Welcome to Glasgow, Leo.
Lots of famous people come to Glasgow. Movie star and activist Leonardo DiCaprio caused a big sensation. But while celebrities get the attention, it was the leaders making the deals.
Together, we're committing to collectively reduce our methane by 30% by 2030.
Methane, often generated by landfills, is one of the most worrisome greenhouse gases. 100 countries have signed up, including big emitter Brazil, but not China and not Russia. However, Vladimir Putin, who's not at COP26, said in a video statement that he is supporting a landmark agreement to end deforestation. Billionaire Jeff Bezos is contributing $2 billion to that cause.
The private sector must also play its part to reduce carbon emissions.
The money, $19 billion in total, will help protect and restore forests from the Amazon to Africa. Companies will essentially pay nations not to cut down their trees as a way to offset their own carbon emissions.
So what we're trying to do is change that economic incentive on the ground to make forests work more alive than dead.
Nancy Tembo is the forestry minister of Malawi in Central Africa.
In my country, Malawi, we have programs to restore all our forests, to regenerate all our forests, and we're trying our best, but we need a support.
But outside the venue, protesters pushed back on the idea of private business riding to the rescue.
Banks like JP Morgan are planning another $5 trillion of investment in new fossil fuels over the next 10 years.
The summit has devoted Wednesday to financing, trying to push the global investment community to change the way it invests to reflect new climate priorities. Former Canadian central banker Mark Carney is the headliner. Chris Brown, CBC News, Glasgow.
With that global pledge to stop deforestation and BC's moves on old growth, let's get some perspective from Dr. Suzanne Samard. She's an author and professor at the Department of Forest and Conservation Sciences at UBC. Doctor, first of all, let's start with BC's plan to ask First Nations about pausing logging of old growth areas. What do you make of that plan?
I think it's a great first step. You know, we really have logged a lot of old growth in British Columbia already, so we're, you know, at the last few percent left. But this is a step in the right direction. To basically defer the logging of old growth forests in the highly productive valley bottoms, the iconic old growth forests. There are issues still that we can discuss, but it's a good move. It puts First Nations in charge of their decisions about deferrals in their territories, which is highly needed. And across the world, we know that First Nations have been excellent stewards of their lands, and so this is good news for all of people around the world. But we still need more work, because one of the things that this will do is it'll shift harvesting. If we don't reduce the overall cut in British Columbia, it will shift harvesting onto other areas, and so that definitely needs to be addressed shortly, or at the same time, as soon as possible.
Do we have the capacity in BC? I mean, certain areas or actual forest in which we can shift? Is there room there, do you think?
There is. I mean, we really have to make the hard decision about the amount that we're cutting. You know, we've been at the same cutting level for the last 20 years, and in spite of, you know, the cumulative effects of wildfire and you know, other developments like oil and gas, and we haven't made these difficult decisions to reduce the cut. So that needs to be done, especially in light of the COP26 pledges that were made today. But, you know, these big old growth forests in the valley bottoms are where the biggest carbon stocks are. They are where the highest amount of biodiversity is. And so this is, to me, is like a first step. And then we need to move on and quickly and confirm these deferrals, and then try really hard to, you know, inform and educate and figure out ways to defer more of it. And one of the things that we can do to continue doing some harvesting, some level of harvesting, is to move into second growth forests. So these are places that have been logged in the past, maybe in the last century or two, and there's already been quite a bit of loss in biodiversity and carbon stock, so they need to be restored and carefully harvested using partial retention, but we can continue to do some logging, to maintain our economic engines until we actually do, come up with alternatives to provide income for communities that rely on forestry, and as soon as possible to, as COP26 has called, to actually stop harvesting in all old growth forests.
Well, as you mentioned, let's move on to the pledge now from COP26. World leaders vowing to end deforestation and land degradation by 2030, $19 billion being invested. We've heard similar pledges before. How confident are you that they'll actually do this?
Well, I mean, the difference between now and 2014 in New York is that there is actually money being put forward. And that money, hopefully, if it's managed properly, will be used to provide Indigenous people around the world and countries to supplement or replace the income from logging their old forests. And so there are market mechanisms that can be used to do that. In fact, Justin Trudeau talked about carbon pricing today, and that is one mechanism. We have the RED program that can be used to defer logging in these sensitive areas around the world. So I think that when the money is there and when the market mechanisms are in place, I'm hopeful that we can actually make this work. It's promising.
All right. Dr. Suzanne Simard, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
They call themselves the Sustainability Teens, a group of young activists determined to make a difference. Coming up, how they use social media to make that change. And at 6:40, almost 1, a live look at Cambie Bridge. City Hall lit up. A rainfall warning is now in effect for Metro Vancouver. Wet going out there. How long will it last and how much will we get? Johanna will tell us in our BC-wide forecast after this.
Wild apples, although they may look a little bit scabby and wormy, they are often more delicious than those you're going to find in the store, and they're all organic and delicious. Today we're going to head out. We're looking to find some wild apples, little crab apples. It's a really great beginner's wild edible because it's unmistakable. An apple's an apple, and we can make some really great recipes and find some flavors that you won't necessarily find in the grocery store in these apples. So it should be fun. My name is Sean Adler. I'm a chef and restaurateur of Flying Chestnut Kitchen and Powwow Cafe. I've been cooking professionally for 23 years. I've been foraging my whole life. Today we're picking apples here in the bush, and it's a very easy wild edible to wildcraft yourself. It's clearly an apple. Often they'll be like, a little pit marked, a little pocky, but what you get is a really nice apple to cook with, actually. 3 guidelines for harvesting wild apples and crab apples is make sure you bring a knowledgeable guide, ensure you have permission to gather from that land, and number 3, ensure that you don't overharvest. Make sure you do leave some wild apples for the wildlife. So this is what I would consider a wild apple tree. It's probably at one point a cultivated variety. The seed has probably been dropped here in the bush by a bird, because we're not in an old orchard, we're just in the middle of a bush. And it's very sweet. It's they're nice apples. Wild apples are high in pectin as well, so you can make a really nice apple jam, things like that. Each variety of apple you're gonna find is different in the sense of how it cooks up. So here's how you make a red wine poached crab apple. We're gonna begin with peeling the apples and then coring with a melon ball. Next, in a large bowl, we're adding a cup of goat's cheese and a 1/4 cup of honey, and we're gonna mix it up. Next, in a large saucepan, we're gonna add a cup of brown sugar, a teaspoon of ground black pepper, and 4 star anise. Top it up with a bottle of red wine. Poach your crab apples until tender, approximately 20 minutes. Each crab apple will take a different amount of time based on the variety of apple and the ripeness, so you can test doneness with a paring knife. You want to poach just until tender. You can put your apples in the fridge and use once cool. The longer you leave the apples in the poaching liquid, the more color they will take on. Next, once the apples are cool, we fill with the goat's cheese mixture and plate on a bed of microgreens topped with candied walnuts and edible flowers. In today's marketplace, there's so many different apples on the market that have been, I think, bred specifically to be super ultra sweet eating out of a hand, whereas all these wild varieties are, I think they're more nuanced. You get the satisfaction of being able to go harvest something yourself and see where it actually comes from the land. It doesn't come from a supermarket. You can feel good about that. This is clearly a nice organic tree. It's, you pay big money for organic apples. So.
In the year 2050, how will BC look? From agriculture to cities, how will climate change life? Don't miss 2050 Degrees of Change, a CBC Vancouver original podcast, now available.
Time for our BC-wide weather forecast with meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe, joining us inside where it's dry, unlike outside. Now, we got this weather warning. You mentioned, I think it was yesterday, the chance for some snow on the local mountains. Where are we at with that?
Yeah, we're going to have to wait a couple of days for snow levels to drop.
Come on.
I know, fear not. We've got a couple more low pressure systems coming at us. This is only our second of 4. But yes, I've got a direct eye to the outside and a direct line to the radar. So I can tell you from safety, it is raining heavily. Let me start off with the temperatures, though. That's the other side of the story. Getting warm over the next couple of days. 10 right now at YVR. We'll see temperatures close to 15 tomorrow across Metro Vancouver. As you can see that big bump up in the temperature trend. This is straight model data, but I think it's doing a pretty good job. Notice the drop as we get down to Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And these are afternoon highs. So we could be looking at some of our cooler overnight temperatures so far this season in just a few days. It's going to feel like a little bit of a temperature ride, especially for those of us on the South Coast that don't normally see these kinds of swings. Starting off with the rainfall accumulation for tomorrow. This is really through the overnight and early morning hours, 40 to 60 millimeters for Metro Vancouver before we get a bit of a break. So here is this evening as I take you through the morning hours. We see a bit of a break between systems for Metro Vancouver, a fresh surge of moisture Wednesday night with that next low, and then that rain will continue through Thursday into Friday. So heads up, our break tomorrow will be one of the last for a couple of days. Cooler temperatures, the story tomorrow morning for places like Prince George, Williams Lake, Kelowna, waking up to some wind chills in the sort of -5 to -7 range. Cranbrook, you've got some wet flurries to kick your day off before sunshine, hopefully in the afternoon. Prince Rupert, showers for you. Still looking at those big winds, Port Hardy, Tofino, under the wind warning for tonight into tomorrow morning. We've got temperatures rebounding for the interior as well. Look as I take you through Thursday and Friday, climbing for a couple of days, and then we start to see some cooler air filter down across the province. Notice those afternoon highs as we head into Saturday and Sunday, struggling in sort of the mid-single digits. So that's showing up in our forecast for Friday and Saturday. 15 for tomorrow. Got really excited typing the 5 there and added an extra bracket, but that's just an excited 15. 13, a bit of a washout. And then, yes, Dan, we'll watch for snow for our local mountains with that rain Friday and Saturday. So very fall-like, enthusiastic forecast.
Yeah, it's almost like it's autumn.
It's almost like it's November.
I'm not the scientist, though. You tell us.
I think you're onto something.
Yes. Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
They are called the Sustainability Teens. They're a group of young people across our province united by the urgency to stop global climate catastrophe. In a new 4-part series with our Creator Network, we spoke with members of the movement who all have a different take on how to be a climate crisis activist. Tonight, we meet the group's social media coordinator and how the fight goes beyond the computer screen.
Hi, I'm Katie, a climate activist from so-called Vancouver, which is the unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I'm with the youth organization Sustainabiliteens, and our organization was responsible for orchestrating Vancouver's biggest climate strikes, mobilizing over 100,000 people in September 2019. We're here to fight for climate justice centering around equity and joy. We're a force to be reckoned with. Personally, I've been involved in the movement for nearly 2 years, and social media has been a big part of my work. Seeing the power of a post is immense, and that's why I love working as a Sustainabiliteens social media coordinator. In this episode, I'm going to explore how social media can be an incredible tool, but also show you how real change doesn't just happen online. Let's face it, for better or for worse, we spend a lot of time on our phones. Social media has quickly become a source of news and information for a large portion of the population. A recent report by Reuters showed that over 50% of Canadians use social media to access news on a regular basis. Social media platforms including Facebook and Instagram have been incredible tools for Sustainabiliteens. We use it to share information about the climate crisis and to let people know when and where we'll be protesting. We take a lot of effort in writing and designing our posts, and we've learned a lot about how to create engagement with climate justice issues. But as climate activists, we know that likes and shares do not translate into measurable change. We can't simply Instagram our way out of the climate crisis or systemic issues. We need people in power to step up, and when they don't, we have to, because we all know about how dire climate change and its effects are. In the Sustainabiliteens, we know that showing up works. To address the climate crisis in Vancouver, we had to start at the beginning, and the first step for us was getting the city to formally recognize that we are in a climate emergency. But declarations mean nothing without action. So in November 2020, we showed up to the City Hall once again to support the Climate Emergency Action Plan, and to make sure the city's declaration was followed by concrete action. Let's take a look at how we got all 35 sections of the plan passed. Okay, so what was the first step in getting the Climate Emergency Action Plan passed?
We knew we needed to put pressure on the city, so we started to plan an action. We created toolkits for businesses, students, and NGOs with other organizations.
What was the next step?
Next up, we needed support from city councillors, so we reached out to representatives across the city to schedule meetings to talk about our action plan.
Building up to the action, we reached out to the media, sent them an outline of our message, and invited them to the event.
Now it was time for the event, so we got Sustainabiliteens and some other organizations to come out to City Hall. We made posters, brought a microphone and speaker, and created a hashtag for the event.
And finally, when it was time for council to vote, we signed up to speak at City Hall to advocate for our action plan.
Thanks for sharing these steps and creating change in real life. As the Sustainabiliteens and members of the youth climate movement, we are here to make meaningful change for the long run because we are based in joy and community. Anyone and everyone can make up an important piece in our overall collective action. If you're able to, there are so many ways that you can sustain the fight for climate justice beyond social media. You could write a letter to your MP, join a local climate group. You could use your passions and interests in the fight against climate catastrophe and as a tool for climate advocacy. But it doesn't have to be protesting or advocating. It can be as simple as having a conversation about climate. About justice, I mean, we do need to get off our phones anyway. It could start with being more present and talking to the people around us.
As popular as ice hockey is in this country, in warmer climes, field hockey reigns supreme. Why some here are taking up the off-ice version of the sport. That's next.
It may not look like a typical classroom, but these grade 12 students are busy learning. This is the First Nations Fitness and Wellness Academy at E.D. Fian School in Saskatoon. The program offers Cree language classes and culturally based social studies, physical education, healthy living, and spirituality courses.
This program creates space for Indigenous youth to connect to who they are and perhaps move forward on a healing journey that probably finds itself beginning with residential schools and the assimilation processes that took place throughout the history of Canada.
If I say Aiden Sanderson Itasigasan, that means my name is Aiden Sanderson.
Aiden Sanderson has been in the program for 4 years. He says he now uses Cree in everyday life when he speaks to his teachers, friends, and family.
Sometimes my dad is like surprised because he knows he didn't teach me that.
One of Sanderson's classmates has also been attending since grade 9. He says he's always been traditional, but learning Cree has helped ground him.
Recently, I went to a powwow, and it just really brought me back into my traditional self, which I really loved.
Before coming here, Isabel Robin attended St. Francis, a Cree bilingual elementary school in Saskatoon. She says she's grateful to learn about her Indigenous history, unlike some of her ancestors.
Our history was hidden for so long and it wasn't allowed to be learned. So now that I get to learn my culture, I guess I get to learn for the children that never got to learn their language and weren't allowed to learn it or speak it.
The program has evolved since it began in 2018, and it's adapted with the school's changes in population. Baptiste says the students are evolving too.
There's almost a process of self-acceptance that has to take place. And when that happens, you can see the physical change, you can see the emotional change, you can see the spiritual change. All of a sudden, they're curious about who they are, and they're proud of who they are. They stand a little taller, they walk a little prouder down the hallway.
It's hoped the program will lead to higher graduation rates, healthier and happier kids, and a more positive learning atmosphere. Non-Indigenous students are also encouraged to sign up, to learn the language, and join their classmates on a cultural journey. Anime Zeviar, CBC News, Regina.
Hi, I'm Amy Bout, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Don't miss the 4th Annual Vancouver Podcast Festival. Enjoy workshops and panels and connect with the podcasting community from the comfort of home. Get your tickets at vanpodfest.ca. And the Corleone Men's Choir marks its return to live performance with special Remembrance Day concerts on November 10th and 11th. Get tickets and learn more at corleone.org.
Field hockey is massively popular in many countries around the world, especially the subcontinents of South Asia. Less so in North America, though. Still, India's Olympic successes have inspired kids from South Asian communities in Winnipeg to pick up a stick. Corey Funk and Travis Goldby dropped in on a practice.
Our philosophy is to teach them the game of field hockey, but really give them the skills to excel and play well. We want to get them to the point that they can play at the national level. It's an 11-a-side team sport, just like soccer. We have forwards, midfielders, and fullbacks, and a goalie.
If you put the pass anywhere in my reach.
The way we move the ball, run off the ball, very similar to soccer, except you got to dribble with a stick with a very small blade. The game's super fast, and it just keeps getting faster every 10 years.
If you consider yourself a good player, you have to run like 2 kilometers in 7 minutes. A national player will run 2 kilometers in 7 and 8 minutes.
I like it because it really helps me being involved with other people. I'm not a social person at all, so I like to be in touch with other people and make friends and became a big family. So that's why I love it.
Field hockey really, first of all, the team spirit. You know, it builds up team, you get to meet new people, and you just get to stay fit and, you know, play a sport that you love.
Over the time, I think this is the only thing that brings me confidence, and like being an introvert, this is something that really makes me confident.
Through the process, we try to instill some qualities of discipline, you know, organization. Taught me a lot of life skills, and you know, hopefully I can pass that on to the kids as well.
I hope it became more competitive, and I hope to see more people playing it and enjoying the game as much as I do.
I would like to call out like other communities, like other people to come out to try this sport and play and learn.
Getting more communities to join this game would be helpful in enhancing skills for all of us. So seeing more new people joining this game would be really great.
Lots of fun to watch, too. Thanks for joining us on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this show on CBC Gem, our free app. You can also catch us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and on our website, cbc.ca/BC. Our next local news is right here at 11 o'clock after the National with Isabel Regem. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.